Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
The main character, after dying in his previous life, he wakes up inside of Marvel as Toby Parker, the son of Ben and May Parker. He grows into a violent anti-hero Spider-Man who uses brutal methods, money logic, and intimidation to reshape Marvel.
I, the bully Spider-Man, will destroy Marvel. Chapter 1. I am Toby Parker, the bully Spider-Man. Toby Parker, that is my name in this life. Yes, Toby is a time traveler, a transmigrator who traveled to the Marvel universe. The reason he traveled through time was the well-known Great Fortune event. However, in this time travel event caused by the Grand Cycle, he was not the victim in his previous life, but the perpetrator. In his past life, he was a heavy truck driver. He was so badly hurt by the son of an elderly man who was trying to stage an accident that he broke down. The man said, "If you didn't hit him, why did you help him up?" He's known for his explosive temper, and he's an orphan with no parents. He's the kind of guy who would curse at all his teammates in the game if someone cursed him on the loading screen while playing CF. How could he possibly tolerate this? The people's dagger, is it? Wait here, I'll go get it for you right away. After getting back into his heavy truck, he started the engine, engaged the clutch, shifted gears, and accelerated in one smooth motion without a second's hesitation, sending the father and son who were trying to stage an accident to meet their maker. Trying to take advantage of me, huh? Try your luck first. Fuck you. As the driver, killing two people in a truck wouldn't have resulted in immediate death. At most, he would have been sentenced to death. But after he ran over and killed the father and son who were trying to stage an accident, a red, blue, and black spider somehow slipped into the driver's seat. By the time he discovered the spider, it was too late. The spider had already crawled onto the back of his hand. Before he could flick the seemingly venomous spider away, it seemed to sense the danger and bit him right in the mouth of his hand. Then, in just 10 seconds, he felt his whole body go numb, his heart suddenly tightened, his vision went black, and he finally lost consciousness. This process can be described as happening in one go. If this is retribution for his murder, then the retribution came way too fast. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a blue-eyed female nurse wearing a blue mask and a blue head covering. Then the nurse handed him over to a woman who was covered in sweat and had a kind face. When he raised his hand and looked at his tender, wet little hand, he immediately realized that he had transmigrated, and the woman holding him was obviously his mother who had just given birth to him after he transmigrated. The nurse had just referred to the kind-looking woman holding her as Ms. May Parker. When he thought of that name, only one person came to mind, and that was. He actually transmigrated into the son of Uncle Ben and Aunt May, who are Spider-Man. Wardfare. 20 years later. Timeline 2008, New York. Hell's Kitchen, Neon Gang. In Hell's Kitchen, a place known as Little Gotham, gang warfare is a common occurrence. But for one person to fight off an entire gang is unheard of, even in the chaotic Hell's Kitchen. I hadn't heard of it before today, at least not. Even those masked street heroes who spend their days fighting crime in Hell's Kitchen wouldn't dare say they'd single-handedly stormed into a gang's headquarters. Because that's like throwing a flashbang into a toilet, like having a Death Star shining brightly above your head. But today, someone did something that even those street heroes wouldn't dare to imagine. And not only did he do it, he single-handedly wiped out an entire gang. Ramble. Da-da-da. Bang, bang, bang. The thunder and torrential rain drowned out the muzzle flashes and gunshots in the darkness. On a rainy night, in the neon gang of Hell's Kitchen, a towering figure, dressed in a black and red full-body suit, cover, carrying a gang member in each hand, slowly walks towards the Neon Gang's shrine, stepping over countless corpses. Hiding in the ancestral hall at this moment are Okamoto Ryuichi, the leader of the Neon Gang, and the remaining members of the Neon Gang. Although these gang members all carried knives and guns, they trembled as if they had Parkinson's disease, and their eyes were filled with fear. And all of this was because of the Grim Reaper, who appeared in their Neon Gang 10 minutes earlier. Nearly 200 members of the Neon Gang were slaughtered by that Grim Reaper single-handedly, leaving only the 20-odd people hiding in the shrine. Seeing his men retreating in fear of a mere individual, crowding into the ancestral hall where he was hiding and almost pressing themselves against the ancestral tablets, Okamoto Ryuichi roared in fury. Baka Yaru! How could we, the Japanese samurai, produce such a bunch of cowards? None of you are allowed to retreat. Kill that damned bastard now, or you will all have to commit seppuku to atone for your sins. After being yelled at by their boss, the underlings, who were already so scared they were about to wet their pants, had no choice but to grit their teeth and walk out of the ancestral hall, trembling all over. They took their guns and went to the courtyard of the ancestral hall, pointing their trembling gun barrels at the only gate of the ancestral hall. Although their gang is called the Neon Gang and all its members are Japanese, they are now fighting every day in the free United States, so their fighting style has naturally been localized. They didn't use samurai swords for their iaido, but rather American-style iaido. The moment the gate to the ancestral hall was pushed open, they, already extremely tense, pulled the trigger without hesitation and unleashed a barrage of fire at the gate. However, Toby didn't even bother to dodge the bullets raining down on him. Instead, he used the two people he was carrying as double human shields in front of him. Even if the submachine guns and pistols wielded by these Neon Gang underlings could penetrate the two human shields in Toby's hands, the remaining bullet impact would not be enough to penetrate his expensive, specially made bulletproof spider suit. The underlings, whose reason had been eroded by fear, had no idea about suppressing the enemy with alternating crossfire. They were all itching to pull the trigger. Therefore, their bullets ran out quickly, and the clicking sound of empty chambers could be heard continuously. When they ran out of bullets, Toby casually tossed the two riddled corpses he was holding onto the ground like trash, and gave them a disdainful smile. "You idiots, do you think you're playing a shooting game with unlimited bullets? You're out of ammo, and you're still trying to reload." Upon hearing Toby's sarcastic reminder, they realized something was wrong and frantically tried to change the magazines. But it was clearly too late. "How? You guys actually changed it. Idiots, save it for your next life." Toby lowered his body slightly, and his narrow, blood-red eyes, visible through the black hood, seemed to flash with a cold, bloodthirsty light amidst the lightning. Awakening, time to hunt. With a powerful leap, Toby's towering figure transformed into a blood-red afterimage and savagely crashed into the crowd. The Japanese gang member who was first hit by Toby was struck as if by lightning. His body was no lighter than if he had been hit head-on by a heavy truck. He was twisted and sent flying backward like a rag doll. Finally, he crashed into the wall of the shrine and was smashed into a pile of minced meat embedded in the wall. It was the kind of thing that couldn't be pried off. The remaining gang members fared no better. Toby, like a wolf among sheep, unleashed a brutal and bloody slaughter on them. Toby's terrifying strength, which often starts at tons, would severely injure or kill these ordinary gang members if they were touched. Chapter 2. The Neon Gang is wiped out. The employer is Kingpin. Okamoto Ryuichi was watching all this from inside the shrine, and he was very anxious. In just a few seconds, almost all of his remaining henchmen were wiped out. Of course, Okamoto Ryuichi didn't really care about the lives of these underlings. Rather, he knew that once these underlings protecting him were all dead, it would be his turn. Seeing that his underlings actually had some sportsmanship, they attacked unarmed, and he too raised his fists. Okamoto Ryuichi couldn't help but roar in anger. Baka! Are you all idiots? You're out of bullets. Why don't you use knives? Have you been in America too long? You can't even use a knife anymore. After being reminded by Okamoto Ryuichi, the underlings being slaughtered by Toby suddenly remembered that, oh right, they were genuine Japanese samurai and used to be skilled with swords. They can't beat their opponents in hand-to-hand combat, but with so many of them, surely they can kill them with knives. If they surrounded each other and each had a knife, they could have hacked the other person to pieces. The remaining men immediately drew their katana from their waists, their faces regaining their confidence, and fiercely surrounded Toby. Weapons used in kickboxing. Toby snorted coldly, showing no fear whatsoever, only even greater disdain for them. Since the other party violated the rules, there's no need for him to continue playing the human punching bag game with these people. Toby bent his knees slightly and leaped upwards. Under the incredulous gazes of the remaining Japanese gang members, Toby defied the laws of physics and squatted down under the branches of the century-old cherry blossom tree in the middle of the ancestral hall courtyard. But then, something even more inhuman happened. Toby, who was crouching under a tree branch, stretched out his hands and shot out white spider silk from his wrists. Each strand of silk precisely wrapped around the head of a gang member. Then Toby, who was crouching under the tree branch, pulled on all the spider silk, and with a sudden burst of strength, lifted up all the remaining dozen or so members of the Neon Gang in the courtyard of the ancestral hall, and hung them all on the tree branches. Snap! It wasn't until a faint thud sounded that Okamoto Ryuichi, the leader of the Neon Gang, was jolted awake from his daze. Okamoto Ryuichi stared in horror at the tall figure who had already stepped into the shrine and was slowly walking towards him, as well as the dozen or so subordinates behind Toby who were still struggling frantically under the cherry blossom tree, their heads wrapped in spider silk and unable to breathe. He was so terrified that he kept trying to back away. But he was already at the very back of the ancestral hall, so there was nowhere else for him to retreat to. There was nowhere left for him to retreat to except for the space of the ancestral tablet. Therefore, when he retreated, he knocked over a large number of his ancestors' plaques. It's as if Okamoto Ryuichi's ancestors are already calling out from the underworld for their unfilial descendant to hurry down and join them. But Okamoto Ryuichi didn't want to die, so he secretly reached behind him with one hand and hurriedly stretched out the other towards Toby, who was walking towards him. Damn it! Damn it! You can't kill me. I'm under the hand. If you kill me, the hand won't let you get away with it. And we can talk. I can give you money. Lots and lots of money. Despite Okamoto Ryuichi's combination of harsh words and promises, Toby remained unmoved and continued walking towards him. The clattering footsteps were like the Grim Reaper's call. Just as Toby was only 7 steps away from 01 Okamoto, 01 Okamoto, who had been acting timidly, suddenly changed his expression, pulled out a pistol from behind his back, pointed it at Toby's head, and pulled the trigger repeatedly without hesitation. Nisachi. 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 A gun is fast from 7 paces away, and both fast and accurate within 7 paces. This is the greatest Iaido technique of this century. Unless the opponent is Superman, Okamoto Ryuichi doesn't believe anyone can dodge his close-range American-style Iaido attack. While Toby isn't Superman, he possesses superhuman reflexes. As if he knew in advance that Okamoto Ryuichi would fire, and where he would fire, he simply tilted his head slightly a few times and precisely dodged all of Okamoto Ryuichi's headshots. What? Okamoto Rei's eyes widened in disbelief that someone could actually dodge bullets, especially at close range with bursts of fire. But before he could reload, he felt a tightness around his neck and was lifted into the air. Okamoto Reiichi immediately tried to raise his hand and smash the gun at Toby's head, but as soon as he raised his hand, the hand holding the gun was grabbed by Toby's other hand, along with the pistol. Clatter, clatter. With a painful sound, Toby violently squeezed the metal and flesh together with the pistol in Okamoto Reiichi's hand. Lara. Baka. That hurts so much. How dare you treat me like this, you bastard? I'm Okamoto, 01 of the hand. It is said that the 5 fingers are connected to the heart. The pain of having one's entire palm crushed into a puddle of mud was unimaginable, so much so that Okamoto Reiichi temporarily forgot his fear of Toby and instinctively cursed out loud. But immediately Okamoto Reiichi couldn't be called out anymore. Because a hand covered in his own flesh and blood pinched his cheek, Okamoto Reiichi's cursing stopped abruptly. I'm done rubbing, please spare me. I'll give you my whole kidney. After being physically silenced by Toby, Okamoto Reiichi realized that his life was still in Toby's hands, and his eyes turned fearful again. She immediately changed her expression again and began to beg Toby for mercy, but because her cheeks were being pinched, she could only make indistinct sounds. Toby chuckled at Okamoto Reiichi's pleas. You're really willing to give me anything. Then lend me your chamber pot head for a bit. I suppose you wouldn't mind. What? Okamoto Reiichi was stunned, but before he could react, he felt a tightening around his neck and a lightness in his body. The next moment, he saw his body fall to the ground. What? How did my body end up on the ground? And why is there only a body and no head? Where is my head? This is truly baffling. 10 minutes later. Fisker building. Bite. Kingpin's private elevator stopped at the top floor of the Fisker building. But when the elevator doors opened, it wasn't Kingpin, the underground emperor of New York, who stepped out, but Toby, who had just massacred the entire Neon gang. In Toby's hands, he held Okamoto Zero's head, which lay there with its eyes wide open in death. The blood flowing from the severed head had stained the entire elevator floor red. As Toby stepped out of the elevator, the scorpion attached to Okamoto Reiichi's head left a conspicuous bloody trail on Kingpin's luxurious carpet. Upon witnessing this scene, which was a blatant violation of the Fisk Tower's hygiene regulations, Kingpin's secretary and security personnel on the top floor not only failed to intervene, but also lowered their heads, not daring to look at the bloodthirsty figure even once more. It's like their heads would explode if you looked at them even once more. Ignoring the 2 guards at the door who were standing with their heads down and sweating profusely, Toby kicked open the door to Kingpin's office and walked in. At this moment, there were 2 figures, one standing and one sitting, in Kingpin's office. Sitting there was Kingpin, who was wearing a white suit, was also over 2 meters tall, and had a physique so strong it seemed inhuman. Standing there was Bullseye, dressed in a black suit, with standard blonde hair, blue eyes, and a gloomy face. Seeing Toby carrying in Okamoto Reiichi's head, King wasn't angry at all. Instead, a friendly smile appeared on his face as he stood up to greet him. Oh, look who's come home. It's my best partner, my dearest friend Toby. But how come you brought back the target's head? Does your uncle Fisk not trust you? Toby threw Okamoto Zero's head at Kingpin's feet, glanced at Kingpin, and said calmly, Whether you believe me or not is irrelevant. This is the professional ethics of an assassin. The money will still be transferred to my black card. You can use the bathroom for a bit. Chapter 3. You actually slapped me for this, man. After saying that, Toby didn't wait for Kingpin to answer whether he would lend it or not, and walked towards the bathroom in Kingpin's office on his own. His familiarity with the place made him seem as at ease as if he were at home. Kingpin didn't say anything about it, his smile remaining unchanged. But Bullseye, standing behind Kingpin with a sinister expression, couldn't stand Toby's arrogant behavior any longer and let out a cold snort of displeasure. HMPH. What's with all this arrogance? You just took care of that trashy Japanese gang for the boss. I could have taken care of that bunch of scum too. Upon hearing this, Kingpin's amiable smile slowly disappeared, and then without warning, he slapped Bullseye across the face. The force of the blow sent Bullseye flying, crashing into the wall and sliding down, where he lay on the ground for a long time, unable to get up. Why? Bullseye lay on the ground, clutching his buzzing head, and looked up at Kingpin in disbelief. He couldn't believe that Kingpin would attack him, a loyal subordinate who had recently sworn allegiance to Kingpin for the sake of a hired assassin. Just an hour earlier, Kingpin had expressed his admiration for him. Now, for the sake of a hired assassin, he's turned his back on me so easily. Kingpin looked down at Bullseye on the ground and said coldly, "Why? Bullseye, this is just a lesson for you, to teach you to control your foul mouth. Do you know what? If it hadn't been Toby who taught you a lesson, you'd be in the same situation as this severed head on the ground. I hope this is the first and last time you speak recklessly without knowing the other person's background. If this happens again, I'll personally rip your head off and make it up to Toby as an apology." Apologize? Bullseye stared wide-eyed, unable to believe that he would one day hear the word apology from Kingpin, the fearsome underground emperor of the underworld. Who exactly is this guy named Toby? Click. Before long, Bullseye, still lying on the ground recovering from Kingpin's powerful slap and even harsher words, was followed by Toby, who had gone into the bathroom and was covered in blood, emerging first. However, Toby was not wearing his red and black battle suit at this moment, but rather a clean white shirt and loose trousers. Clearly, this was a casual outfit that Kingpin had already prepared for Toby. Even though Toby was only wearing a simple white shirt, it couldn't hide the muscles that were faintly visible beneath it. While Toby's muscles weren't as exaggerated as Kingpin's, which had grown to the side, they possessed a kind of artistic beauty. To use a phrase that's been overused in online articles, perfect muscle lines like those of an ancient Greek sculpture. Without the mask, Toby's near-perfect face was finally revealed. With a chiseled, handsome face, deep blue eyes, and dark brown hair, it's a face that would make anyone, man, woman, or even someone who's a Walmart shopping bag, exclaim that it's incredibly handsome. If anyone's character model is more perfect than Toby's, it would probably only be that supreme being called the Reader. Kingpin turned to look at Toby, who was coming out of the bathroom, his gaze shifting from Bullseye, and a smile returned to his face. "I like your efficient nature in everything you do, whether it's killing someone or taking a bath, Tilda. Toby, seriously, are you really not going to consider working for me long term? If you join, I can double your current job pay." Toby remained expressionless in the face of Kingpin's high offer. "No, I still prefer to do one job, collect one payment, and live a free and easy life. You can contact me again if you need work in the future, but don't mention soliciting me again. Oh, by the way, could you wash my battle suit and send it back to my home and give me some change?" Upon hearing this, Kingpin could only nod regretfully. "All right, that's a real shame. I'll give you an extra $1 million for today's payment later, as an apology for the idiotic words and actions of my idiot subordinate just now. As for the battle suit, I'll have it washed and delivered to your home tomorrow." As he spoke, Kingpin pulled out a check and casually wrote a 1 and 5 zeros on it. "Here's the change." Toby nodded to Kingpin and accepted the change of a full 100,000 without any hesitation. He then glanced at Bullseye, whose expression remained defiant, and sneered. I accept your apology, but I really don't like this guy's hairstyle, so next time we meet, if he's not bald, I'm going to smash his head in. After saying that, with Bullseye's barely suppressed anger, Toby walked out the door without looking back. However, just as he was about to step out the door, Toby paused, turned to Kingpin, and muttered, By the way, I'm not efficient at everything, so watch your words next time. After saying that, Toby left. Kingpin's smile slowly faded, only after Toby rode the elevator down. He glanced at Bullseye and said indifferently, See that, Bullseye? This guy is not only incredibly strong, even I'm terrified, but most importantly, he's extremely vengeful. But a powerful person who holds grudges, that's what's truly terrifying. So if you want your head back, go shave it yourself. Otherwise, I can't protect you, and I won't risk offending Toby, that vicious spider, just to save you. Hearing Kingpin's blunt words, Bullseye knelt on the ground, head bowed and silent, his fists clenched so tightly that his fingernails dug into his flesh. Drops of blood dripped from the palm of the target's eye, mixing with the blood flowing from Okamoto Ryuichi's head on the ground. It was as if an invisible force was warning Bullseye that if he didn't do as Toby said, then Okamoto Zero Rekai's fate would truly be his future. Kingpin, disregarding Bullseye's pride, commanded, I'll throw Okamoto Ryuichi's head out to feed my dogs. Tomorrow, I'll take over all of the Japanese gang's territory and businesses. And starting tomorrow, I don't want to see a single Japanese person in Hell's Kitchen again. Now I'm going to be with my Vanessa and tell her the good news. She'll never have to worry about those clueless Japanese people harassing her in Hell's Kitchen again. Kingpin may have a high opinion of Bullseye, the newly recruited elite henchman, but that's about it. In his mind, Bullseye and Toby were not on the same level at all. So after patting Bullseye on the shoulder one last time, leaving him the task of cleaning up the mess, he ruthlessly pushed open the door and left. Kingpin's reason for destroying the Neon Gang was, as he himself said, simply because someone in the Neon Gang harassed his woman. This seemingly insignificant crime was enough for this underground emperor to spend millions to hire Terry to wipe out the entire Japanese gang. Of course, this wasn't entirely a losing proposition for Kingpin. Afterwards, Kingpin took over the territory and businesses of the Japanese gang, reaping profits well over 10 million. Bullseye scrambled to his feet, watching Kingpin's departing figure, his eyes filled with malice. I guarantee that after tomorrow, you'll never see another neon dwarf in Hell's Kitchen. Clearly, Bullseye is ready to vent all the anger he suffered at Toby's hands on the Japanese in Hell's Kitchen. He wanted to use this to prove that his bulls was no weaker than Toby's. If Toby knew, he might have forgiven Bullseye for his previous offense, saving Kingpin that $1 million apology fee. After all, he loves destroying the little lives of his friends. Chapter 4: Toby's Past. His cousin Peter Parker. Unfortunately, Toby didn't know. Toby had already returned to his home at 10437th Avenue in Flushing, Queens. Toby stood in the doorway, rubbed his face, which was stiff from the day's excessive killing, and then, with a smile, pushed open the door bearing the Parker family's logo and called out, Dad, Mom, Peter, I'm home. As Toby entered, the first thing he smelled was a strong aroma of baked biscuits. Then a middle-aged man and a woman, along with a young man who was even younger than Toby, came forward to greet them. The two middle-aged men, named Benjamin Parker and May Riley Parker, are his parents in this life. The young man, however, has a name that everyone is more familiar with, Peter Parker. That is, the friendly neighbor Spider-Man. However, Peter is currently just an ordinary person, not Spider-Man. And Uncle Ben and Aunt May also had a son who shouldn't have existed. And it's unknown whether it's because of the mysterious spider that bit him in his last life. Although Toby has never been bitten by any radioactive spider in his life, he has been different from ordinary people since childhood. They are stronger, more agile, and even have a higher IQ than the average person. And as he gets older, Toby discovers that his body has more than just these conventional attributes. He was stronger than others from the beginning and also has some superpowers that normal humans shouldn't have. For example, the ability to cling to walls at any angle like a spider, or the ability to shoot super tough spider silk from the wrist. And that precognitive, spider-like sense. All of this convinced Toby that he had awakened Spider-Man's abilities. And it's also the Spider-Man's power, played by the actor of the same name, Tobey Maguire. Because his strength is clearly greater than that of the average Spider-Man, he can easily lift a cargo truck weighing tens of tons with one hand. You should know that the strength of an ordinary Spider-Man, under normal circumstances, is at most able to lift objects weighing tens of tons, but he has the maximum strength of an ordinary Spider-Man with one hand. Furthermore, it can shoot its own spider silk without relying on any technological launcher. It can produce and use spider silk from its own body. Aside from the monstrous Spider-Man who can tear venom apart with his bare hands, there aren't many Spider-Men who can do this, right? So even though Toby, as a time traveler, doesn't have the standard system, he can still live a colorful life thanks to Spider-Man's abilities. However, even with Toby as a variable in this world, Peter Parker, who was 2 years younger than him, could not escape the fate of being an orphan when he was 10 years old. Peter was taken to stay at his parents' house for a short time when he was informed that his parents had died in a plane crash. Toby could have used his prophetic abilities to save Peter's parents earlier. However, because his abilities were not fully developed at the time, his two most important abilities, Spider Silk and Spider Sense, had not yet awakened. So, to avoid attracting the attention of Osborn Corporation, which was researching the Super Spider project at the time, Toby, who was not very close to his cousin Peter, ultimately chose to stand by and watch Peter's parents never return. Naturally, because of the death of Peter's parents, Peter, his cousin, went from being a temporary resident to a permanent resident in his home, and his parents, Ben and May, became Peter's guardians. This year, Toby is 20 years old, and Peter is 18. After 8 years of being together, the two have long since transcended the distinction between cousins, and their relationship is as strong as that of brothers. Just like other Spider-Men who hide their abilities, Tobey Maguire didn't reveal his abilities to his parents or Peter Parker. However, he did not deliberately hide his extraordinary strength, nor did he pretend to be a weak and easily bullied bookworm. Besides, with his 2-meter height and 140 kg build, he simply couldn't pull off the image of a weak, bookish nerd like Peter. However, the Parker couple, as well as Peter, never doubted him. After all, Toby didn't suddenly become so strong. He's always been this strong since he was a child. They all assumed Toby was just naturally strong and loved working out. After awakening all of Spider-Man's abilities and perfectly adapting to them, Toby's first action was not to put on the suit and become a good neighbor in New York. Instead, he put the CS terrorist balaclava on his own head and ran off to the Hell's Kitchen, a place known for its outstanding people and resources, to steal and rob people. Relying on his absolute stats, comparable to the original Spider-Man, and his spider sense that allows him to foresee danger, Toby always reaped huge profits, quickly amassing over $1 million in illicit gains through double-crossing. But if you walk by the river often enough, you're bound to get your shoes wet. His double-crossing behavior quickly caught the attention of Kingpin, the underground emperor of Hell's Kitchen. King uses a huge deal involving American herbs as a trap, deliberately letting people leak the substantial amount and location of the deal in order to lure Toby into robbing it. Toby naturally went. After all, it's about making money, and there's no shame in doing so. But Toby did not fall into the trap. He's just greedy, not a tiger. This is clearly a trap within a trap. Would he be stupid enough to jump right in? Spiders are cautious and dangerous creatures. So while Kingpin's men were still pretending to make a deal and waiting for Toby to take the bait, Toby had already quietly snapped the necks of all the gunmen lying in ambush around them. Then they appeared and easily dealt with the bait that was completely unaware of them. They took the box containing a large sum of cash and set fire to the American herbs they had pretended to trade, giving the neighbors in Hell's Kitchen a good blast. After all, it's better to share happiness than to enjoy it alone. But just as Toby picked up the suitcase to leave, the phone rang from the suitcase containing the cash. Toby hesitated for a moment, and only after sensing no danger from the box did he open it, take out the phone that had been placed inside, and answer it. The call was from Kingpin. But Kingpin didn't come to make any threats against Toby. Instead, he expressed his admiration for Toby's abilities and said he wanted to schedule a time to have a proper talk with Toby. He also said he could help Toby launder all the money he had made from his previous shady dealings and arrange a legitimate job for him so he wouldn't have to do those disgraceful, low-paying, shady jobs anymore. After hearing this, Toby didn't answer Kingpin. Instead, he crushed the phone in his hand. But the very next day, he appeared silently in Kingpin's office at the Fisk building. When Kingpin returned to the building, he opened the door to find Toby sitting in his chair with his legs propped up on his desk, as if the other person were the owner of the Fisk building. Kingpin's personality was actually somewhat like Cow's. Although he was ruthless, he also valued talent. Instead of being upset by Toby's rude behavior, he helped Toby launder all the dirty money he had previously obtained and registered a job as a hired assassin in the underworld with the code name Spider. This gave Toby a proper identity in Hell's Kitchen. One of them lacked money, and the other lacked manpower, so it was only natural that they reached a long-term cooperation agreement. Toby helps Kingpin eliminate rival gang targets, and Kingpin pays Toby a substantial reward. For example, after the massacre of the Japanese gang, Kingpin gave him a commission of $10 million. In addition, he paid Bullseye $1 million to apologize, which brought him a total of $11 million. In his previous life, even if Toby drove a truck and hauled goods his whole life, he wouldn't have earned this much money, not even a fraction of the $1 million Kim earned to apologize to Bullseye. Chapter 5: A Warm Home, Toby's Two Sides. But being a truck driver is something from Toby's past life. After being maliciously scammed by that damned father and son in his past life, the first thought he had when he opened his eyes in this life was that he would never be a good person who looked forward again, because good people might not get good rewards in the end. He wants to be a bad person who only cares about money. Money can't solve all problems, but it can solve 99% of them. For example, his family situation, which was not wealthy throughout his life. Toby pulled the change check from Kingpin's pocket and handed it to Ben Parker. I completed a project at the Fisker building this month, and Mr. Wilson Fisker gave me a $100,000 bonus. Use that to replace your old, outdated car. Ben Parker didn't seem particularly surprised that Toby suddenly produced such a large sum of money. After all, Toby was not only born with superhuman strength, but also a prodigy. Not only did he consistently maintain the top academic ranking in his school from elementary school onwards, but he also skipped grades all the way through, graduating early from MIT at the age of 18. He graduated from MIT just 1 year later than the world-famous Tony Stark, who graduated at the age of 17. With Toby's extraordinary talent that was anything but understated, he naturally attracted many large corporations to recruit him after graduating early. For example, top corporations like Osborne Corporation, which killed Peter's parents, and Stark Industries, Tony Stark's company, both sent people to recruit Toby. Ultimately, Toby didn't choose any of them, but instead went to work at Fisker Tower, which is also one of the top buildings in New York City, where he has been for 2 years now. As for why Fisker Group was chosen, I believe there's no need to elaborate. He was just a figurehead at Kingpin's Fisker Group. He never actually worked a single day. Jin not only has to pay himself a salary, but also has to pay himself task rewards. With such a free and flexible job, why would I want to work like a slave at another company? Do you really think he's some kind of workplace masochist like Spider-Man or Superman? In short, in Ben Parker's father's view, it's only natural that his boss would reward his son, who is so talented, with a substantial bonus after he completed a project at the company. And this isn't the first time Toby has given money to his family. Since Toby started working for Fisker, in addition to sending a fixed $50,000 from his monthly salary home as living expenses. Occasionally, like now, a project bonus will be suddenly given to the family. So Ben Parker didn't mince words and accepted the check Carl handed him without any hesitation. However, he didn't actually intend to use the money to buy a new car, as Toby had suggested. Instead, he laughed and said, "Same as always, I'll keep it for you. You might need it when you get married and have kids. As for my car, don't worry about it. I can't bear to replace my old buddy." Toby's lips twitched slightly. Didn't I already say? Don't worry about my future. I have plenty of savings. That's for sure. Over the years, the work he did in the underworld, although not every mission was as lucrative as this one that wiped out a gang and earned him tens of millions of dollars, had already amassed a fortune of over $100 million in savings. Even if he retires early now, with this money, as long as he doesn't get involved in gambling or drugs, it's enough for him to live a carefree life. Just then May, carrying a plate of cookies, tapped Toby on the head and scolded him. "Toby, that's not right. Young people like you, these days, are used to spending money recklessly. How would you know how much it costs to get married, have children, buy a house and a car? We're saving this for you now, so that you can have an easier life in the future." Toby covered his face, helplessly. His parents were good in every way, kind, and not old-fashioned. They had always supported him in whatever he liked since he was a child. But just like millions of parents in China, they can never bear to part with themselves and always think of their sons first. He now brings home enough money each month for Ben and May to enjoy their retirement without having to work hard anymore. But the two of them continue to work diligently, earning a fraction of what they made sending home without touching a single penny of Toby's money. They saved it all for him. Well, Toby has gotten used to his parents' simple and honest nature over the past 20 years. Don't make me make the decision myself. I'll just go pick up a car for him tomorrow, and that'll be the end of it. He's done this kind of thing a lot in the past 2 years, acting first and informing later, which is why his mother, May, says he's used to being extravagant. Aside from the house that Ben and May built up, Toby has gradually replaced almost all the appliances, furniture, and household items with top-of-the-line ones. After ignoring his parents, who were still grumbling about their old age, Toby pulled a leather envelope from his pocket and placed it in Peter's hand. He smiled and said, "Here, this is your allowance for this month." Peter, who had been watching Toby's family's harmonious scene with envy, blushed and scratched his head somewhat embarrassedly, saying, "Cousin, I haven't even finished the allowance you gave me last month, so I don't need to give you any this month. Besides, I'm all grown up now. I can earn money through part-time jobs." Before Toby could even speak, May preemptively slipped the envelope into Peter's pocket and began lecturing him again. "Your cousin gave it to you, so just take it. You're graduating this year and going to university, so you need to focus on your studies. You're not allowed to do any part-time jobs. Ben chimed in, "Yeah, Peter, now's not the time to make money, it's the time to spend it. And don't I remember you liked Mary Jane Watson, the daughter of Dr. Philip Watson next door. These days, you can't pursue girls without some money, so just accept what your cousin is giving you." After being told this by May and Ben, especially after Uncle Ben found out about his secret crush on Mary Jane, Peter, who was not good with words before becoming Spider-Man, was so embarrassed that he almost buried his face in his chest. Upon hearing the name Mary Jane, Toby paused, looking at Ben with a puzzled expression. Mary Jane. Aren't the Warrens our neighbors? Ben smiled and shook his head. You probably don't know because you've been leaving early and coming home late lately due to company projects. But the Warrens and their daughter moved to Connecticut at the end of last month, and the Watsons moved in next door. And our Peter fell in love at first sight with the Watsons' eldest daughter. Toby nodded knowingly upon hearing this. It seems that even in this universe, Peter can't avoid meeting his destined Mary Jane. Toby looked at Peter, whose face was already as red as a monkey's bottom, took the plate of cookies from May's hand, and patted Peter on the shoulder. Come on, Peter, come upstairs with me and play some games to relax. Okay. I'll take the cookies upstairs for you first. Peter, who had been wanting to escape the scene for a while, quickly took the opportunity given to him by Toby. After snatching the cookie plate, he darted upstairs like a spider whose rear end had been set on fire. Toby shook his head helplessly at Ben and May, those two old rascals who were teasing Peter, and followed them upstairs. I don't know if it's because this universe has its own version of them, but the Ben and May in this universe, although they are as kind as in the movie, have lost some of that seemingly eternal sadness and gained more of a joyful and colourful tone. Chapter 6. Toby and Gwen's Acquaintance and Past. Toby, on the other hand, will always protect the joyful atmosphere in this little family. On the third floor, in the game room that Toby had specially decorated, Toby and Peter were playing games and chatting together. Peter was still a little reserved in front of Ben and May, the two parents. But in front of Toby, his cousin who wasn't a blood brother, but was better than a blood brother, Peter immediately opened up and started talking non-stop. He's already showing signs of Spider-Man's talkative nature. However, Peter did most of the talking, with Toby only occasionally chiming in. Peter started talking about how he taught himself photography, used the allowance Toby gave him to buy his dream camera, and planned to do some part-time photography work. He talked about how he fell in love with Mary Jane, and how her red hair amazed him when they first met. Toby listened quietly to the pure love that this young boy was developing for Mary Jane, but his heart was not greatly moved. To be honest, Toby wasn't very interested in Mary Jane, and even disliked the character because of stereotypes. Because in most Marvel movies and comics, Mary Jane's character is not very likable. Most of the time, he plays the role of a cumbersome, decorative character alongside Spider-Man. Furthermore, she is an extremely fickle character who could easily give Spider-Man a green crown. In other words, the character designs in games and comics are better. Seeing that Toby was clearly not interested in the topic of Mary Jane, Peter wisely stopped talking about it and changed the subject. By the way, Toby, Gwen asked me to ask you after school yesterday if you're free tomorrow. It's the weekend. As you know, Gwen is currently interning at Osborne Enterprises. She said that Dr. Connors is having a Q&A session for interns tomorrow, and as Dr. Connors' assistant, Gwen has 2 seats available to observe. She wants to invite us to attend together. Actually, I know she just wanted to invite you, and I was just incidentally included, but I really want to hear Dr. Connor's Q&A session up close, so would you like to come with me? Seeing Peter's expectant eyes, Toby naturally didn't refuse and agreed. Peter was so happy, he almost jumped for joy. As for Toby, who skipped grades and graduated 2 years ago, how he met Gwen, who is 2 years younger than him, is a long story. First of all, Toby and Gwen's acquaintance is actually unrelated to the fact that Peter and Gwen were classmates. Instead, it's related to his other identity, the assassin Poison Spider from Hell's Kitchen. That was 2 years ago. He was entrusted by Kingpin to help Kingpin routinely kill a rival gang leader who had just been released from prison. Coincidentally, the gang leader who had just been released from prison was the one who had been arrested and imprisoned by Gwen's father, Sheriff George Stacy. Even more coincidentally, the night Toby killed him was also the night the gang leader planned to retaliate against Sheriff Stacy. But the leader couldn't possibly go directly to the police station to retaliate against the NYPD chief. He didn't have the power to be so arrogant. So naturally, they set their sights on Sheriff Stacy's daughter, Gwen. They kidnapped Gwen on her way home from school. And if you want to kidnap someone, then kidnap them. If you want revenge, then just kill them. But this idiot insisted on making Sheriff Stacy feel extreme pain, making her do whatever he wanted to her daughter Gwen, and then record it and send it to Sheriff Stacy. And villains like this often die because they cause too much trouble. While this idiot was setting up the scene and setting up the video camera, Gwen managed to hold out until Toby arrived, and she was still perfectly fine. To be honest, Toby didn't go out that day with the intention of saving people. He didn't even expect to encounter such a thing. He even leisurely finished his dinner at home before going out. As a result, even though Toby dawdled, he still managed to catch up. When he arrived, that idiot was still fiddling with his video recorder. All I can say is that Gwen truly deserves her title as one of Marvel's chosen ones. She can do anything. Since he was already here, Toby decided that he didn't intend to be a good person anymore and instead wanted to be a bad person who only cared about money. But he wouldn't just stand by and watch a girl be humiliated in front of him. After all, isn't this a waste of his time? Even if that idiot only has a few minutes, it's still a waste of his precious time, okay? So, before that idiot even realized there was someone behind him, Toby slapped the idiot's head into his chest, right in front of Gwen's wide blue eyes. After completing his mission, Toby casually untied the ropes binding Gwen before leaving. And it was precisely because he bent down to untie that things went wrong. To this day, Toby still doesn't understand why Gwen, a girl who neither mutated into superpowers nor had just been nearly assaulted, didn't feel grateful for saving her life and cleanliness in that near-death experience. Instead, he carefully observed the features of his savior and remembered the unique woody scent of his home that clung to him. So when Gwen smelled the same woody incense sent on her classmate Peter, but his body shape didn't match, she asked Peter about Toby and followed him to her house to confirm. Upon meeting, Gwen raised her hand to measure his body shape and covered his head with her palm while nodding repeatedly. Upon getting closer, Gwen went even further, coming right up to him and sniffing him with an expression that said, "I knew it was you." After that, Gwen, who had already discovered Toby's true identity, would frequently visit him under the pretense of being Peter's classmate or friend. At first, Ben and May thought Gwen was Peter's girlfriend from school, but they later discovered that the girl wasn't looking for their nephew, but their son. The elderly couple, having a child late in life, naturally took a great liking to Gwen, the girl who took the initiative to approach them and would secretly create opportunities for the two of them to be alone together each time. However, Toby never responded to Gwen's open display of love for him, remaining as unyielding as a block of wood that doesn't understand emotions. However, this doesn't mean Toby isn't interested in Gwen, or that he's genuinely unaware of Gwen's feelings for him. It's just that the current online literature environment doesn't allow it. Who would dare touch a 16-year-old girl? Therefore, even 2 years later, Toby and Gwen remain in a state of being more than friends, but not quite lovers. However, Gwen and Peter are the same age. Peter is 18 now, so Gwen should be an adult by now. Thinking of this, Toby shook his head and decided to let things take their course. If Gwen still has special feelings for him, then he'll accept it. If not, then so be it. He's not some desperate loser who, once he joins Marvel, immediately starts fawning over Gwen and other female characters. In this life, he has no shortage of women. When it comes to working for Kingpin, Kingpin is always very cooperative, never neglecting to provide him with money, goods, or women. Chapter 7 talks about Gwen. Gwen arrives. Toby wasn't exactly a haughty person. He'd accept anything Kingpin offered. He accepted money and goods. He also sleeps with women. However, Kingpin's women were basically one-time affairs. Once he was done with them, he would send them away. Women given to you by someone like Kingpin are fine to play around with, but don't take them seriously, or you might just be a venomous snake he's lurking next to you. As a spider, Toby doesn't like having a venomous snake around all the time. As for Gwen, whom he knows well, Toby wouldn't mind developing a long-term relationship with her. After all, the Gwen in this universe is indeed very beautiful and fits his aesthetic perfectly, just like a comic book character who has stepped into reality. In fact, all the characters in this universe, including Peter, Ben and May and Kingpin, look closer to their comic book counterparts. After playing games with Peter for a while, Toby went back to his room to rest. Although his physical condition is now far beyond that of ordinary people, Toby still prefers to go to bed early and get up early unless he is on a mission. Spider-Man's physique gave him the ability to rise in the Marvel universe, so without a system, he needs to take better care of his body. The next day, while Peter was still fast asleep on his day off, Toby had already finished lifting weights in the specially dug underground gym and gone for several laps around the neighborhood. As Toby finished his last lap of his daily morning run and prepared to go home, he noticed a pair of eyes staring at him from next door. Toby looked in the direction he sensed and saw a girl with fiery red hair looking at him from the neighboring yard. Seeing that Toby was looking over, the red-haired girl walked over confidently and extended her hand to him. "Hello, you must be Toby Parker, the cousin Peter mentioned, the son of Mr. Ben Parker and Ms. May Parker." After a quick glance, I realized that Mary Jane was at least an 8 out of 10 in appearance and seemed to have a very sunny personality. Toby reached out and gently grasped her fingertips, smiling slightly. "Hello, I'm Toby Parker. I've heard Peter mention you too, the fairy neighbor with the beautiful red hair. No one dislikes nice words, especially the sweet words of a handsome guy." Therefore, Mary Jane's first impression of Toby was undoubtedly very good. After a brief introduction, the two chatted for a few minutes. During their conversation, Toby also discovered that Mary Jane in this world didn't seem as unlikable as most movies and cartoons. On the contrary, she had a cheerful personality and spoke with grace and poise. It seems I still have some strong stereotypes about Marvel characters. After Toby's initial impression of Mary Jane improved, the sound of Mary Jane's parents calling her home for breakfast ended their brief conversation. Watching Mary Jane enter the house and witness the loving interaction between her and his parents, Toby nodded knowingly. It seems that not only Mary Jane herself, but even Mary Jane's family in this universe is not so repressed anymore. My father was not an alcoholic or abusive, and my mother did not die of grief. She lives in a happy family. This may be why Mary Jane's personality in this universe is completely different from the unlikable, gloomy, and materialistic woman in the movie. Toby was relieved. He no longer had to worry about his poor, silly cousin being cuckolded. Back home, Toby took a shower and came out feeling refreshed when May had just finished preparing breakfast and put it on the table. Meanwhile, his lazy cousin, sporting a messy head of hair, was being reluctantly pushed downstairs by Ben to eat breakfast. Toby sat in his seat, biting into a sandwich that didn't actually taste very good, but he smiled happily. As an orphan abandoned in an orphanage from birth in his previous life, this rare kinship was undoubtedly invaluable to him. In such a warm atmosphere, even the awful food May made seem to taste delicious. Of course, this deliciousness was only to Toby. Peter and Ben were biting into their sandwiches, their expressions contorted as if they were gnawing on a shoehorn and struggling to swallow. This prompted May to give the uncle and nephew another lecture, while also praising her son for being sensible and not being a picky eater. This made the uncle and nephew, who already had a hard time swallowing food, look as bitter melons. When the doorbell rang, Ben and Peter breathed a sigh of relief and rushed to open the door. As soon as they opened the door, the two saw a little sun shining brightly, standing in the doorway. With her radiant blonde hair, equally radiant smile, and slender figure, it was Gwen Ben Wynne. "Hi, Uncle Ben, Peter." Gwen's appearance was like a radiant angel, saving Ben and Peter, the uncle and nephew. The two quickly ushered Gwen into the house. After entering, Gwen walked confidently into the dining room and waved to the two people at the table. "Hi, Aunt May, you look even younger." May stood up and hugged Gwen, her face full of joy. "Oh, Gwen, you still have such a sweet tongue, but you seem to have lost weight. We're having breakfast now. Come sit down and have some with us." As she spoke, May naturally placed Gwen in the seat next to Toby and ruthlessly took away the plate that originally belonged to Peter, bringing Gwen a new breakfast. It wasn't that May knew Gwen was coming, so she made an extra portion. Rather, Toby's physique is simply too big for him to eat. A single serving of breakfast is not enough for one person. So, May usually prepares enough for 2 to 3 people for Toby. Now that Gwen is here, it's a good opportunity to share some with her. I'm sure her son won't mind. After all, her son weighed 300 pounds, while Gwen looked like she might not even weigh 100 pounds. So for the sake of our future sexual happiness, my son should lose some weight. Wait, my son doesn't seem to have any fat on him. He's all muscle. In short, Gwen needs to gain some weight. Otherwise, May is worried her son might crush a young girl. Gwen and Toby had no idea what filthy thoughts were going through May's mind at that moment. Gwen also showed May her toned, but not very muscular biceps, saying that she only looked thinner because she had been working out recently and wanted to catch up with Toby in terms of physique. Hearing this made May even happier. Look how sensible she is. In order to be worthy of her son in every way, she not only studies diligently and competes with her nephew for the top 2 spots in the grade year after year, but she is also equally competitive in terms of physical fitness. It seems she can't let Peter continue to be lazy. She should make him train with Toby regularly. Even if he doesn't become as big as Toby, he should at least get out of the skinny dog category. And her husband, Ben, his belly is almost bigger than when she was pregnant with Toby, so he and Peter also need to lose weight like Toby. The uncle and nephew, who had already sneaked off to KFC while Gwen was being led to the door, were unaware that May had already arranged for them to undergo Toby's hellish training regimen. Chapter 8: Gwen's Emotional Ups and Downs. After serving Gwen her meal and chatting with her for a bit, May used the excuse of going to catch Peter and Ben to give Toby and Gwen some alone time. As soon as May left, Gwen's face immediately fell, and she spat out the sandwich she had just taken a big bite of in front of May. Whispering to Toby, Toby, May's food tastes as peculiar as ever. Toby swallowed the food in his mouth and said calmly, although it does taste bad, at least it's healthy and non-toxic, and it won't make you commit slow suicide like eating fast food outside. Even the highly intelligent Gwen was speechless after hearing Toby's incredibly blunt and chauvinistic remarks. If you've said that, how will she ever be able to eat fast food again? However, despite saying that, Toby still got up and went to the kitchen, where he fried 2 eggs for Gwen and placed them in front of her. Gwen looked down and smelled the fried egg on her plate, her eyes shining as she looked at Toby with adoration. Why does this fried egg smell so tempting, even though you only added a little salt and rosemary? Toby said honestly, because you just ate some terrible food. The contrast makes even ordinary food taste delicious. Upon hearing this, Gwen's bright smile slowly faded, and she felt truly defeated by Toby's statement. Shouldn't you say something that would move her even more, like, it's the power of love that makes simple food so delicious? Listen to what you're saying. You think the food tastes good because the food in front of you tastes bad. This is human food. I'll eat it. Seeing that Toby was still oblivious and continuing to eat his awful sandwich, Gwen angrily picked up her knife and fork and began to slash the fried egg on her plate as if she were slashing Toby. Stinky Toby. Stinky Toby. Toby caught a glimpse of Gwen's adorable expression out of the corner of his eye, a slight smile playing on his lips. He suddenly asked, "Want to go shopping together later?" "Shop? Shop my foot. You. Hey, what did you say?" Halfway through her tirade, Gwen suddenly looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at Toby. Has this blockhead, who's been so dense for 2 years, finally gotten it today? Toby, no, actually you're an adult now. Toby smiled slightly and repeated what he had just said. How about we go shopping together later? Okay, but why? Why so suddenly? I'll go back and change my clothes first. Yes, I'll go change my clothes. Gwen clearly hadn't expected Toby to suddenly have a change of heart and ask her out today. Her face flushed red, and she stood up awkwardly, her hands and feet not quite right, and walked out stiffly like a robot. But she had only taken 2 steps when a large hand grabbed her wrist. Looking back, she saw Toby, the very man who had plunged her into such a state of turmoil. Gwen felt the burning hot hand on her wrist and stared dizzily at Toby's face, which she had been eyeing for 2 years, her head practically steaming. Is Toby in such a hurry that he wants to confront me right now? Should I accept it readily, or pretend to be reserved before accepting it? Just as Gwen was internally agonizing over whether to accept it or not, Toby said, "Eat the fried egg. Don't waste food." Gwen. That blockhead's uncle has only half opened his mind. In the end, Gwen obediently finished the fried egg and didn't go home to change into her pretty clothes. Instead, she wore the same ordinary grey sweater, jeans, and light blue Converse sneakers she had on the way there to her first date with Toby. Actually, saying dating might not be entirely accurate because Gwen looked at the car city in front of her, and her eye twitched violently. Who would bring a girl to the car mall on their first date? Gwen looked up at Toby with deadpan eyes and asked speechlessly, "Why did you bring me to the car mall? You're not planning to buy me a car, are you?" This was the best outcome she could think of under the circumstances. Although she certainly wouldn't accept such an expensive gift from Toby, she would be happy as long as Toby meant it. Toby looked down at Gwen, who was a head shorter than him and had to look up to meet his gaze, and suddenly a strange idea popped into his head. The height difference between him and Gwen is so great, it seems like Gwen could just stand there. Ahem. Immediately, Toby shook his head, dismissing the strange thought from his mind, and replied, "No, I'm planning to get Ben a new car." He's been driving that old car since I was born. It should have been retired a long time ago. I'd like you to help me choose a new car." Gwen chuckled upon hearing this, with an expression that said, "I knew it. This guy hasn't figured things out at all. He's clearly just using me as a tool." However, Gwen never refused any of Toby's requests, so she just snorted and agreed. In return, she wanted Toby to treat her to a nice meal afterwards. Gwen thought that even if this wasn't a date, Toby had to pay a price. Toby, naturally, wouldn't refuse such a small request. And as it turns out, Toby's decision to choose Gwen for advice was absolutely correct. If he were to come by himself, he would probably just pick any new sedan that is the same model as Ben's old classic car. However, Gwen considered that while sedans might have been more popular when she was younger, middle-aged people generally prefer more practical models like pickup trucks. So, on Gwen's recommendation, Toby ultimately chose the latest Ford F-150 Raptor R. The release date of this car is in a parallel universe. Please don't delve into it. The price is a little over $110,000, which is not much different from the $100,000 budget he gave Ben yesterday. It's not that Toby insists on buying according to this budget. With a net worth of hundreds of millions, why wouldn't he buy his father a better luxury car? Instead, if he were to actually buy a luxury car worth over $1 million, not only would his parents give him a good scolding, but he probably wouldn't even be willing to drive it out. Around 100,000 is probably the limit that Toby estimates the elderly couple can accept in a single instance of spending. It was almost noon by the time I finished registering the vehicle. Toby happened to be driving this Ford Raptor with Gwen to a Michelin-starred restaurant for a nice meal. In the afternoon, Dr. Connors would be asking questions, and Gwen, as Dr. Connors' assistant, naturally had to go and help out beforehand. So after Gwen gave Toby 2 temporary ID cards for entering and exiting the Osborne building, he first took Gwen to the Osborne Corporation. When he got home, May, Ben, and Peter had already returned. As soon as Toby entered, the 3 of them looked at him with a strange smile. Without needing to guess, Toby knew what the 3 were thinking. However, they were going to be disappointed, because Gwen had to go to Osborne Enterprises to help out in the afternoon, so after lunch with Gwen, he didn't get to know her any further. Chapter 9 is Peter about to become Spider-Man. Upon hearing this news, the 3 onlookers all looked disappointed. When Toby tossed the new car keys to Ben, as expected, he got a lecture from the elderly couple. Only Peter enthusiastically raised his hand to add fuel to the fire, saying he wanted to try out the new car. In the end, because Toby knew so well how to manipulate the elderly couple's psychology, the price of around 100,000 was just within their acceptable limit. So after the elderly couple scolded Toby, they still smiled. May smiled happily because her son was filial. Ben's smile was mostly a smile of joy at the prospect of having a new partner. After all, no man dislikes his new car. What? You're asking what to do with the old buddy. I was just saying I'd miss yesterday. Ben said he'd take it to the junkyard tomorrow. After all, his old buddy was old enough to retire. In the end, Ben beat Peter to the punch and was the first to sit in his new companion's seat. This is his beloved car. How could he let someone else take its first time? As for Toby, Toby was just the parking attendant who drove the car back for him, not the first driver at all. Watching Ben fidget with the steering wheel, the car door, and then get out and touch the back of the car, Toby, Peter, and May covered their faces in utter speechlessness. Ultimately, Peter was disappointed that he couldn't test drive Ben's new car, because he hadn't had enough of touching Ben's car after spending a long time with it. After changing clothes with Toby, we drove to the Osborne building. Although Ben was always willing to change cars, Toby actually already owned a car, an Audi R8. However, it wasn't bought. Kimbin gave it to him as a gift after commissioning it. So Toby told the elderly couple that he had done an excellent job on his project and that his boss had rewarded him with the car. That's actually not wrong. Isn't a killer project a project? However, after driving the Ford Raptor that Ben bought for him, Toby felt a bit uncomfortable driving his Audi R8, as if it was too cramped. After all, while the Audi R8 isn't as low-slung as a sports car, it's still considered compact for a 2-meter-tall vehicle. So Toby plans to change the time and get himself a big car like the Raptor. Well, I'll probably ask Gwen for advice when the time comes. As for the R8, Peter can drive it. He's got his license now anyway. If Peter knew now that Toby was going to give him the R8, he'd probably be completely dumbfounded. What? You mean my mode of transportation has been upgraded from a skateboard to an Audi R8? After the two arrived at their destination and got out of the car, Peter looked up at the Osborne building, one of New York's iconic buildings, and his eyes suddenly became somewhat complicated. What's wrong? Toby asked when he saw this. Peter shook his head, but there was a clear hint of disappointment in his eyes. It's nothing. I was just thinking about some things from the past. My parents used to work for the Osborne Corporation, and I have a very good friend who is from the Osborne family. But the year my parents had their accident, my friend was also studying abroad. Upon hearing Peter's words, Toby stroked his chin thoughtfully. The good friend Peter mentioned was undoubtedly Harry Osborne, but he didn't know that Harry and Peter's parents died around the same time they went abroad to study. What a coincidence in timing. Is there any connection between these two things? But before Toby could figure out the connection, Peter's smile returned. But during my most difficult time, thankfully I had you, Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Otherwise, I really don't know how I would have gotten through it. Toby paused for a moment after hearing this, then patted Peter on the shoulder. We're brothers. I should always be by your side, and never will be. Seeing Peter, who had endured so many setbacks in life, yet still smiled brightly, and maintained a pure and kind heart, Toby suddenly began to doubt whether he had been right to stand by and watch Peter's parents die. However, the idea quickly faded away. The past cannot be changed, and it's useless for him to think about it now. All he can do is change the present. For example, killing Norman Osborn, the culprit who murdered Peter's parents. With his current full Spider-Man powers, he could easily kill Norman Osborn, or even the entire Osborn family, without anyone noticing. But Toby looked up at the Osborn building, his eyes flashing. Perhaps Peter should handle this himself, so as not to leave him with regrets in his life. After all, barring any unforeseen circumstances, Peter will soon gain Spider-Man's powers. He agreed to accompany Peter to the Osborne Corporation, not only because of Peter's request, but more importantly, because he remembered that the radioactive spider that turned Peter into Spider-Man was in the Osborne building. That was a super spider that Peter's father had modified by adding his own genes to. Only those with Peter's father's bloodline who are bitten by this super spider can become Spider-Man, instead of being poisoned or turning into a genetically mutated spider monster. However, Peter's father and his own father, Ben Parker, are brothers, so logically, shouldn't he also be able to accept the transformation of the super spider? Want to try it? Anyway, judging from the plot, there was more than one radioactive spider. Toby suddenly had a bold idea. However, just to be on the safe side, Toby decided to let Peter try it first, while he would catch a few radioactive spiders to conduct experiments and confirm that there were no problems before proceeding. After all, he already has Spider-Man's abilities. If he gets bitten again, who knows what kind of accident might happen, such as genetic collapse or mutation. He certainly didn't want to become a spider monster with 8 eyes, 6 legs, and shooting webs from its rear end. "Hey, Toby, Peter, what are you two still doing standing in the doorway? Come on in." Gwen's sudden voice interrupted Toby's thoughts and pulled Peter out of his grief and emotion. The two walked toward Gwen, who was waving at them from inside the building. After swiping the temporary card Gwen had given them to the security guard, they entered Osborne Corporation without any trouble. At this moment, Gwen was wearing a white researcher's lab coat, which not only did not diminish her beauty, but made her appear even more intellectual and charming. Even Toby couldn't help but compliment her, saying, "The white coat suits you very well. You look beautiful." Gwen turned around with a sly smile upon hearing this, deliberately circling in front of Toby and winking at him. "Oh, so you like this style? If you treat me to another meal, I'll wear this to my next date, okay?" Gwen was just teasing Toby, but Toby actually nodded in agreement. "Okay, how about next weekend? I'll treat you to dinner." Upon hearing this, Gwen's pupils dilated instantly, and her heart pounded so hard that Toby, with his extraordinary hearing, could hear it clearly. Toby smiled slightly as he observed all of Gwen's subconscious physical reactions. It seemed that Gwen really did have a physical attraction to him. Just 2 simple date invitations caused her emotions to fluctuate so drastically on both occasions. Chapter 10, Master, what do you do for a living? I'm an insecticide worker. In America, a country that values openness and freedom, a girl willing to be kept in suspense for 2 years while still steadfastly loving you is truly a rare find. Peter, who had inexplicably been subjected to a display of affection, suddenly leaned between the two, giving Toby on the left and Gwen on the right a deadpan look. "Hey guys, did either of you notice I'm still here? And Doctor, Connors's event is about to start, right? Can we go and attend it first? Once the event is over, you two don't need to worry about me. Go do whatever you want, okay?" Interrupted by Peter, Gwen calmed down a bit, blushed, and quickly turned away to hide her embarrassment. "Ahem, of course. Come with me, Doctor. Connors should have arrived by now." After saying that, Gwen walked forward again, her hands and feet moving in unison. Peter scratched his head and asked curiously, "Gwen's walking is acting strange. Is she feeling unwell?" Seeing that Peter was even more of a straight man than himself, Toby shook his head and gave Peter a 2-finger tap on the back of the head. "If you can't talk, then don't talk. Nobody will think you're mute." After saying that, Toby strode over to Gwen, took her cold little hand in his, and led her forward. Gwen stared blankly at the large hand holding her head, which had just calmed down a little, spinning again, and she lost all sense of what was going on. This time it wasn't just her overthinking. Toby, that blockhead, really did get a wake-up call from the electric drill. "Do I have a boyfriend? Gwen. Miss Stacy, aren't you going to introduce these two to me?" Gwen was jolted out of her daze when a calm voice rang in her ears. Looking up, he realized that Toby had brought him to Dr. Connors without him even noticing. Aside from being a bit too love-struck around Toby, Gwen is generally a very rational person, so she quickly returned to normal and introduced him to Dr. Connors. "Dr. Connors, this is Peter, my classmate. He's even better than me in biology, my only rival at school, and a true genius." Hearing Gwen introduce herself so ostentatiously, Peter, looking quite embarrassed, extended his right hand to Dr. Connors. No, Gwen is much smarter than me. She's the most talented person my age I've ever met besides my cousin. Doctor. Connors pointed to his empty right hand with his left finger and shrugged. "Sorry, Peter, I'm afraid I can't shake your right hand yet. It hasn't grown back in long enough." Oh, I'm sorry, Doctor. Connors, I didn't mean to. Peter then remembered that Doctor. Connors had lost his right arm on the battlefield for the country, and he couldn't help but feel remorseful. He knew these things, but he got so nervous when he saw his idol in person that he forgot them. Doctor. Connors smiled gently and shook his head to indicate that it was all right. Seeing that Doctor. Connors didn't seem to care. Peter breathed a sigh of relief, but his curiosity was piqued, and he couldn't help but ask. Doctor. Connors, what do you mean by saying that your right arm hasn't grown back yet? Upon hearing Peter bring this up, Doctor. Connors also became interested and explained. Because I've been researching the amazing self-healing limb cells in lizards, if I could successfully transfer them to humans, I think I could help millions of soldiers like me who have lost parts of their bodies on the battlefield, and at the same time, it would allow me to regain my wholeness. Then, Doctor. Connors remembered that Gwen had just introduced Peter, saying that Peter was a student even more gifted than her in biology, and suddenly said, Well then, the interns should be arriving in a while, so let me show you around my lab first. Doctor. Connors hired Gwen, a student who was still in school, as his assistant because his colleagues in society were stuck in established formulas and could no longer offer him better suggestions for innovation. That's why he turned his attention to young geniuses, hoping that these young geniuses, who were not yet trapped in their fixed ideas, could give him some new thoughts and suggestions. Gwen was the young prodigy he met at a party through Sheriff Stacy. Now that he has encountered a student, even more outstanding than Gwen, Doctor. Connors naturally felt a renewed appreciation for talent. Peter was naturally happy to agree. It was a great honor for Peter to be able to visit the idol lab. However, before heading to the lab, Doctor. Connors looked at Toby with a smile and asked, By the way, what's this gentleman's name? Gwen also knew that although Dr. Connors was a kind person, he actually had a bit of the arrogance of a scientist. He didn't like those muscle-bound, brainless idiot athletes. So fearing that Dr. Connors might mistakenly categorize Toby as one of these idiots based on his physique, he quickly introduced him. This is Toby Parker, who now works at Fisker Enterprises. He used to be New York City's #1 prodigy, graduating with honors from MIT at the age of 18. Upon hearing this, Dr. Connor's eyes flashed with surprise and confusion, but he quickly suppressed it and extended his left hand to Toby with a smile. Mr. Parker, I've heard of you. After you graduated, you caused quite a stir in New York. Basically, all the big names in New York invited this genius to join them. Even Mr. Norman Osborn personally tried to recruit you, but unfortunately you refused. Otherwise, you'd probably be my boss now. In response to Dr. Connor's joke, Toby shook his left hand and smiled in return. Liao Zhan, it's not that I'm too talented, it's just that my contemporaries were too stupid. It was only because of the contrast with my contemporaries that I gained some reputation back then. As for biology, I am far inferior to Dr. Connors. I am not very good at biology, which is why I did not choose to join Osborne Corporation, which focuses on biotechnology. Faced with the praise that had once made him famous in New York, Dr. Connors was extremely pleased, and his smile widened even further. I'm old. Now it's your era. The future belongs to you young people too. By the way, I still don't know what kind of work Mr. Parker is doing at Fisker Corporation. Toby shrugged and said bluntly, Our underground pest control work mainly focuses on New York City, but we occasionally go to other cities to do the same, depending on where the client's target is. Gwen's eyes widened immediately upon hearing this, and she looked up at Toby with disbelief in her large eyes. Chapter 11. How to make goddesses, doctors, and geniuses worship you simultaneously with just one C. My goodness, how can you say such things out loud? Is it okay to just talk about your job like that? Gwen was saved by Toby in a bloody way, and it was after that she fell hopelessly in love with the man. So she naturally knew that when Toby talked about cleaning up the underground pests, he didn't really mean the literal pests, but rather the pests among humans. However, Dr. Connors clearly hadn't considered that possibility. Only a hint of regret for Toby flickered in his eyes. Oh, so your research is on pests. That's really impressive. In today's human society, after being polluted by industrialization, pests are indeed becoming increasingly difficult to eradicate. If a genius like you were to dedicate himself to this research, he might actually make a huge contribution to the work of eradicating pests for all of humanity. It's a pity. I always felt it was a shame that with your talent, you only devoted yourself to pest control research. Kingpin's Fisker Enterprises is ostensibly a conscientious company focused on philanthropy, so it's quite reasonable for Toby to say he's in the field of pest control. Apart from Gwen, who was in the know, no one, including Peter, suspected anything. Toby, unfazed, replied, "No matter how small the task, with great power comes great responsibility. I believe I am better at pest control, so I did it. There's no question of whether it's a pity or not." The three of them were stunned for a moment upon hearing this, and each had their own thoughts on Toby's words. Doctor. Connors felt ashamed, never expecting that at his age he was not as insightful as a young man in his early 20s. Peter looked on with admiration, thinking to himself, no wonder he's my cousin whom I've looked up to since I was a child. Even his ideological awareness is much higher than that of ordinary people. Finally, there's Gwen, whose gaze towards Toby is filled with adoration. No wonder he's the man she's determined to win over. Intelligent, brave, strong, low-key, indifferent to fame and fortune, living in darkness but with his heart in the light. It seems that all the good qualities in the world can be embodied in this man. Even his perfectly modeled face seems to pale in comparison to these noble qualities. He's so amazing. I love him so much. Seeing the three men giving him positive looks with different emotions, Toby fell silent. Did he say anything outrageous? He just borrowed his father's famous quotes and sayings. Seeing the three of them staring at him, Toby said helplessly, "Aren't we going to visit Dr. Connor's lab? Or are you planning to just keep staring at me until the interns arrive?" Upon hearing this, the three of them came to their senses. Dr. Connors had completely abandoned his seniority and invited Toby in a peer-like tone. "Mr. Parker, please come with me. It is my honor to have you visit my laboratory." He then led the way toward his laboratory. The three exchanged a glance and followed. After being disinfected, the group entered Dr. Connor's private laboratory. Although the laboratory is not very large, it is fully equipped, and all the scientific research equipment is the latest model on the market. Some of these are even biological research equipment unique to Osborne Corporation, which cannot be bought elsewhere. Dr. Connors first introduced Toby and Peter to his various previous research findings. With Toby and Peter praising him, Dr. Connors then introduced the project that everyone was most interested in, which is also what he is currently working on, the cross-species lizard gene regeneration serum project. Connors looked at the few dead mice in the test chamber, his expression somewhat disappointed. "I have successfully completed countless cross-species biological research experiments, but this lizard regeneration serum research project, which I most hope to succeed in, has been stuck for a full 10 years, preventing me from succeeding at the last step. Everyone says I'm the modern Darwin in cross-species genetics, But only I know that compared to the true geniuses among humans, I'm still one step behind, and that one step is a chasm I can never cross. If anyone can be called the Darwin of modern cross-species genetics, there's probably only one. If he were still alive, the final algorithm would probably have been solved long ago. Toby's eyes narrowed. He already knew who Dr. Connors was referring to as him. Toby wasn't the only one who guessed it. Peter, who was standing nearby, also did. Peter's smile slowly faded, and his voice lowered as he addressed Dr. Connors. The person you're talking about is. That's right, Doctor. Connors interrupted Peter before he could finish, his eyes filled with guilt, and replied, "It's your father, Richard Parker." Although Gwen did not mention Peter's last name when introducing him, she did mention Toby's last name when introducing him. As for Toby, Dr. Connors knew about him, having known for 2 years that Toby was the nephew of one of his former colleagues. Peter calls Toby his cousin, so his identity is obvious, and Dr. Connors already knows. That's why Dr. Connors's gaze toward the two brothers was so complex when he learned of Toby's identity. A thought flashed through his mind, and Dr. Connors continued. Peter, actually, this research was originally conducted by your father Richard and me. With Richard's intelligence, I believe he is fully capable of completing this regenerative research that could benefit countless people. Unfortunately, in the final stages of this project, the flight your father was on tragically crashed, leaving this algorithm to trouble me for 10 years. I'm sorry, Peter. I was your father's colleague and friend, but I haven't visited you even once in all these years, simply because I hate Richard for leaving at the crucial moment of the regeneration research. I hate him for depriving me of the chance to regain my whole body. But it wasn't until Toby's words today that I realized, with great power comes great responsibility. I didn't have the ability, yet I presumptuously tried to fulfill responsibilities beyond my capabilities, and even blamed it all on your father. I truly feel ashamed. I'm sorry, Peter. As Dr. Connors said his final apology, Peter clenched his fists tightly, his whole body trembling slightly. It seemed like she was angry, yet also like she was sad. Chapter 12. Peter gave Dr. Connors a lesson. Dr. Connors thought Peter was angry. Gwen thought Peter was sad. But only Toby knew that Peter was actually just a little embarrassed and nervous. Unlike the original story, Peter only discovers his father's briefcase and its hidden contents when he grows up. With the arrival of Toby, the butterfly, many things in this universe have changed as he flaps his wings. This includes the time when Peter received his father's belongings. With Toby appear by his side, Peter was not as lonely as in the original story, and his personality became much stronger and more optimistic. Therefore, Ben did not hide Richard's belongings for fear of causing Peter grief. Instead, after some time, he handed the briefcase that Richard had left behind to Peter. So Peter had long ago learned from the photos hidden in the briefcase that his father and Dr. Connors were actually good colleagues and friends. That's why Peter developed an interest in Dr. Connors from a young age, admired Dr. Connors' knowledge of cross-species genetics, and regarded him as his idol. According to Toby, Peter's special desire to attend the Q&A session with Dr. Connors stemmed not only from wanting to meet his idol, but also from wanting to personally ask Dr. Connors about his father's past work. Sure enough, Peter looked up, his eyes not filled with anger, but rather with embarrassment as he looked at Dr. Connors. No, Dr. Connors, I'm the one who should apologize. This was originally a project that you and my father were jointly responsible for, but because of my father, you've been stuck in this project. I should apologize to you on behalf of my father. Upon hearing this, Dr. Connors stared blankly at Peter. You're not angry with me. Peter scratched his head. You didn't do anything wrong. Why should I blame you? My father's death was an accident. It has nothing to do with you. Doctor. Connors suddenly felt as if his heart had been stabbed, and he looked at Peter speechlessly. I never imagined that after a lifetime of pride, being hailed as an authority on interspecies genetics, my mentality would be inferior to that of my 2 children. Richard, you're not only outstanding yourself, you also have an outstanding son and an outstanding nephew. Seeing Dr. Connors deep in thought, Peter suddenly pointed to the blackboard on the wall and asked, Dr. Connors, may I borrow it for a moment? Go ahead. Although he didn't know what Peter wanted to do, Dr. Connors, who felt guilty towards Peter at the moment, immediately nodded. Peter was given permission and immediately picked up a pen and began writing on the blackboard. Dr. Connors stood behind Peter, looking at the algorithm Peter had quickly written on the blackboard and finding it increasingly familiar. He quickly recognized it. Wasn't this the algorithm formula for lizard cell regeneration serum? That formula that he had tried for 10 years but could never get the right result from. But now, in less than a minute, Peter wrote the complete algorithm on the blackboard, surpassing his 10 years of effort. This is. Dr. Connors was so excited that his voice trembled slightly. Thump. As Peter finished his final stroke, he turned and nodded to Dr. Connors. That's right. This is the final algorithm for the lizard regeneration serum. My father had actually completed the algorithm, but he hadn't had a chance to give it to you before the accident. Dr. Connors slowly walked to the blackboard, looking at the correct algorithm that had troubled him for 10 years now, laid out before him. His eyes were filled with complex emotions as he murmured, Richard, it's been a whole 10 years, and I still haven't expected you to teach me a lesson. You're really something. After sighing, a spark of hope rekindled in Dr. Connor's eyes, and he turned to Gwen and said, Gwen, could you please tell the interns that I have an urgent research project to attend to, so the Q&A session has to be postponed. Could you please take them to the next day? Gwen knew that the problem that had troubled her teacher for 10 years was now solved, and Dr. Connors would no longer be in the mood to teach interns, so she readily agreed. Then Dr. Connors looked at Peter and smiled, inviting him. Peter, would you be interested in taking your father's place and working with me on this significant research? Peter pointed to himself, both surprised and delighted. Me? Really? Dr. Connors said leisurely. Of course, I'll arrange an assistant position for you and pay you a salary. Upon hearing this, Peter's neck turned red with excitement, and he couldn't wait to agree immediately. But before agreeing, he turned to Toby and asked, Toby, is it okay? He hadn't forgotten what Uncle Ben and Aunt May had told him. He wasn't allowed to think about part-time jobs and had to focus on his studies. But if Toby has no objections, and Toby is on his side, he believes he can definitely persuade the elderly couple. Toby said calmly, It's your own business. You can make your own decisions. Just remember, I will always be on your side. Peter didn't grasp the deeper meaning in Toby's words, assuming that Toby had agreed. Therefore, he and Dr. Connors eagerly threw themselves into the research on the regenerative serum. Toby shook his head slightly, deciding not to disturb them any longer, and walked out of the laboratory with Gwen. Although his plan to take Peter to find the super spider had changed, it wasn't a big problem. He was planning to take a few more super spiders with him anyway, and he just put one on Peter and have it bite him. The result is the same. Therefore, after leaving the lab, Toby used the excuse of going to the restroom to leave the lab and did not go with Gwen to the intern team, but left alone. After leaving, Toby made his way to the super spider breeding room with practiced ease. Now that he's ready to get the super spider, Toby naturally wouldn't be completely unprepared. Yesterday, he commissioned and obtained the structural blueprints of the Osborn building, as well as the genetic code of the super spider breeding chamber. After avoiding several surveillance locations that might arouse suspicion, Toby quickly arrived at Osborn Corporation's super spider breeding room. After unlocking the door with the genetic code he had obtained beforehand, Toby walked in confidently. According to the information Kingpin provided, there were no cameras in the incubation room, so he didn't need to worry about being filmed at all. Inside the breeding room, the super spiders that Peter's father bred had their own genetic locks added to them, which meant that Osborn Corporation could only utilize their super tough super spider silk, but could not utilize the other abilities of the super spiders. Chapter 13, Peter gets bitten finally. Gwen gets a little drunk. So this cultivation room is basically a silk-producing room, filled with the silk of the super spider. Toby gave a cold laugh. In his view, sending someone to eliminate the person who trained the super spider, before finding a way to decipher it, shows that Norman Osborn is really senile from his family's hereditary disease. These super spiders are a complete waste at Osborn Enterprises. Moreover, Osborn Corporation is simply not qualified to possess the super spider created by the Parker family's ingenuity. A cold glint flashed in Toby's eyes. With his left hand pressing down on his right wrist, a dozen or so much thinner spider silk threads than normal shot out from his wrist with a soft poof sound, precisely wrapping around a dozen super spiders. With a pull of Toby's wrist, more than a dozen super spiders were wrapped in spider silk into balls slightly larger than marbles during their retrieval. The spider silk balls had tiny gaps, so Carl wasn't worried that these super spiders would die in a short time. He simply put them into his large coat pocket. Next, Toby fired more balls of silk, blocking the fire sprinkler vents on the ceiling with his silk. Finally, he pulled out a Molotov cocktail with a specially made casing that could not be detected by security checks from his other pocket, and pulled off the pin with one hand. Click, thump. As the pull ring landed, Toby casually tossed the incendiary bomb into the spiderweb-covered incubation chamber. Upon contact with the spider silk in the cultivation chamber, the incendiary bomb's blazing white flames instantly spread throughout the chamber, igniting countless super spiders on the silk. Amidst the squeaking and screaming of these super spiders, Toby coldly walked out of the incubation room. Osborn doesn't deserve these super spiders, and Toby shouldn't let anyone else have them. Although the probability is very small, he doesn't want anyone other than himself to one day crack the super spider's genetic lock and gain Spider-Man's powers. Therefore, it would be best if everything in this world, except for the super spider in his hand, disappeared. The world needs Spider-Man, but it doesn't need that many Spider-Men. After Toby stepped out of the super spider incubation chamber, the piercing fire alarms blared throughout the Osborn building. Because he blocked the water outlet of the cultivation chamber in advance, the fire inside could not be controlled. After burning all the super spiders to death, the fire was already showing signs of spreading outwards. Toby didn't care at all. He simply strolled among the panicked crowd and quietly came up behind Peter, who was also evacuating from the building with the crowd. He took a super spider out of its cocoon and placed it in Peter's collar. He then vanished without a sound, appearing beside Gwen, who was looking around in the crowd. He put his arm around her waist, shielding her in his embrace, and easily squeezed a path through the crowd using his size advantage. Upon smelling the faint woody scent emanating from Toby, Gwen felt incredibly at ease, leaning against his broad chest as he led her out of the building. It was truly remarkable how, because of the height difference between Gwen and Toby, after Toby put his arm around Gwen's waist. He simply lifted her legs off the ground with a gentle motion. She didn't even need to take a single step. Once outside the Osborne building, Gwen was slightly tipsy, like a kitten that had inhaled catnip, her face flushed and reluctant to leave Toby's arms. However, Gwen soon discovered someone who was even more drunk than herself. That was Peter. Peter was crouching on the ground, clutching his head, with Dr. Connors looking anxious next to him. Upon seeing this, Gwen's slightly tipsy mind immediately cleared, and she pulled Toby along, quickly heading towards Peter's direction. "Oh my God, teacher, what's wrong with Peter?" Gwen asked Dr. Connors anxiously, looking at Peter's flushed face. At this moment, Dr. Connors was also filled with anxiety and bewilderment. "I don't know either. Peter and I had just started experimenting with the new algorithm when the emergency evacuation alarm went off in the building. Peter and I quickly evacuated with everyone else. But Peter suddenly shouted during the evacuation, and shortly after he became unwell, saying he felt dizzy. I was just about to call an ambulance. Upon hearing this, Toby stopped Dr. Connors from calling for an ambulance, lifted Peter up with one hand, and shook his head, saying, "It's too chaotic here, and the emergency personnel might not be able to arrive in time. I drove here, and I'm taking Peter to the hospital now, so don't worry." Seeing the composed Toby, Dr. Connors and Gwen both breathed a sigh of relief and indicated that they understood. Because Toby's Audi R8 is a two-seater, Dr. Connors and Gwen couldn't accompany him. They could only tell Toby to let them know when Peter was all right. After Toby readily agreed, he helped the half-dazed Peter into his R8 parked on the side of the road. However, after starting the car and leaving, he did not take Peter to the hospital as he had told the two men, but instead drove home. Because Toby knew perfectly well that Peter wasn't actually sick. Rather, it's the body's genes that are being recombined, which is not a problem that ordinary doctors can solve. And even if it could be solved, Peter wouldn't need it. This is a gift from heaven, not a disaster. After Toby brought Peter, who had fallen into a deep sleep home, he did not find Ben and May there. It's the weekend, and the two of them are taking a break. The reason he wasn't there was probably because his dad had taken his mom for a drive in his new car. He might not even come back tonight. And it's better that he doesn't come back, so he won't find another excuse to tell them about Peter's situation. After putting Peter back in his room and covering him with a blanket, Toby left him alone. Now he just needs to wait for Peter to complete his transformation on his own. As for the rest, he would explain it to Peter slowly tomorrow. As Toby had predicted, Ben and Mrs. May did not plan to go home today. They simply called Toby and told him and Peter to take care of their own dinner, as they had other business to attend to and would return home the next morning. Toby just hopes that his elderly parents won't have another son. However, in reality, his parents in this universe, Ben and May, are not as old as the first and second generations in the movie. They are more like the third generation of Aunt May. In her 50s, she may not be young, but she's certainly not old either. Moreover, because Toby has been buying supplements for the family for the past 2 years, the elderly couple looks no different from middle-aged people in their 40s. Yes, it means the elderly couple definitely have the potential to experience a second spring in their lives. After placing the remaining super spiders in the eco-box he had prepared in his underground private gym, Toby prepared a nutritious and delicious dinner for himself, freeing his taste buds from the torment of plums all night. Chapter 14. Spider-Man Peter makes his appearance. After exercising for a while and playing games by himself for a bit, Toby went to sleep on time at 9 p.m. Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks. Damn it. What happened? Don't spill it. In the morning, Toby was awakened by Peter's exclamation, "Next door." Toby slowly sat up in bed, and amidst the constant thumping sounds of Peter's trouble coming from next door, he leisurely dressed, brushed his teeth, and then opened the door to Peter's room next door. Toby glanced at the shattered alarm clock on Peter's bedside table. Then, looking at Peter in the toilet, who was desperately trying to plug the water hose that was still spraying water after the faucet was unplugged, he shouted, "Peter!" Upon hearing Toby's voice, Peter turned around, his expression somewhat flustered, and stammered, "Oh, Toby, I can explain this. Although I'm not entirely sure myself, I believe I can come up with a reasonable explanation. Trust me." Upon hearing this, Toby showed no surprise whatsoever. After all, he was the one who secretly orchestrated all of this. So Toby raised his wrist, and a white spider silk shot out, instantly blocking the pipe that Peter couldn't plug no matter what he tried. Peter was completely stunned. Pointing at Toby's wrist, he stammered, How did you do that? And what was that just now?" Toby didn't answer Peter's question, but instead tilted his head at him and said, "Come with me." With that, Toby took the lead and walked outside. Seeing this, Peter had no choice but to hurry and follow. The two went downstairs, and Peter followed Toby to the underground gym, which was usually only frequented by Toby. Toby turned on the gym lights, picked up a specially made 1,000 kg barbell from the dazzling array of equipment with one hand, and threw it at Peter's feet. Thump! Peter lifted up. Upon hearing this, Peter pointed at himself, bewildered, and stammered, "Ha! Me. He felt it just now. When the barbell landed at his feet, the ground shook violently. Moreover, looking at the enormous weight plates on both sides of the barbell that he had never seen before, he could easily imagine that the weight of this barbell had completely exceeded the normal range of barbell weights. Toby nodded. "Yes, it's you, Peter Parker. Lift it up." Having received Toby's confirmation, Peter, realizing he hadn't misheard, swallowed hard as he looked at the barbell at his feet and asked, "So, how heavy is this thing?" Toby replied casually, "It's not heavy, only about 2,200 pounds. "Oh, so it's only two. Wait, you said it weighs." Peter breathed a sigh of relief at first, but then realized he had misheard. It wasn't 200 pounds, but more than 2,000 pounds. That's 1 ton. Such a generous gift of crabs. This barbell is as heavy as a dozen of my own. At that moment, Peter suddenly realized that his cousin's strength seemed a little abnormal. Keep in mind that the highest deadlift record in human history is only close to 500 kg, while my cousin easily lifted a barbell that weighs more than twice as much as the highest record with one hand. Is this even human? Peter suddenly felt like he was a stranger to his cousin. Until, smack, the familiar pain shot through his head. Only when Peter saw Toby retract his 2 fingers from his head did he realize that this was indeed his cousin, not some alien in disguise. Toby patted Peter on the shoulder and said in a steady voice, "Peter, I know you have many questions in your mind right now, and I will tell you everything you want to know, but only if you raise it first." Toby's voice seemed to have a magical power, gradually calming Peter's complicated feelings, and then he nodded emphatically to Toby. It wasn't that Peter really wanted to figure everything out, but rather that he trusted his cousin. From childhood to adulthood, everything my cousin said had its reasons. This time is no exception. Peter bent down, gripped the bar with both hands, took a deep breath and pulled hard. Peter then felt a sudden dizziness. When his vision cleared again, Peter found that all he could see was the ceiling. Looking down, he realized that he had fallen to the ground, and the barbell was pressing on his chest. Waldifer, what on earth happened? This was Peter's first question. Then Peter looked at the barbell pressing against his chest and instinctively cried out to Toby for help. God. My chest. My chest. Toby, save me. Please save me. Upon hearing this, Toby not only didn't go to rescue Peter, but instead crossed his arms and a playful smile appeared on his lips. Help! Peter, have you forgotten how it got on top of you? Ha! Peter was taken aback when he heard this, and then his clever little brain quickly went through the save file to recall the events. I thought the barbell weighed 1,000 kg and I couldn't possibly lift it, so I decided to try my best to pull it a little bit, and that would be enough.